folks. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with me, Bill Reimer, your reluctant prophet. I have an addendum to yesterday's that I wish to share with you as things heat up with Tamara Lynch and Chris Barber on trial downtown. God help them. God grant their lawyers the wisdom to answer all the nefarious mischaracterizations that they'll inevitably be subjected to by a court system that's solidly under Trudeau's control. So, today's podcast is in addition to yesterday's, where I discussed how the inevitability of outcomes are predictable when causal behaviors are examined. Moreover, that the greatest predictive body of work ever compiled is the Scriptures, since they depict the nature of God and man in such sharp contrast that all of man's foibles and sins are laid bare in brutal detail. Which is why progressives detest the Bible, since a cursory reading of it would instantly disabuse them of any hope of saving themselves, much less the planet. For this is a planet which, due to our own sinful nature, has been subjected to futility. Which leads me to today's topic. Only delusional fools could create immigration policies aimed at attracting cultures whose core values include the traditional role of women. Cultures who believe the primary reason for women's existence is as both caregivers and the protective bastions of their culture. So-called progressive governments with radical unrestrained immigration policies are importing people whose fundamental core values contradict their own. Values the newly immigrated will not relinquish, since that value structure is fundamental to their religion. Yet Western governments, with Justin Trudeau as the foremost leading example, are actively attacking the very nature of womanhood with policies that entail the radical sexualization of children, extreme abortion schemes, and so-called feminist agendas. The fact Trudeau promotes anti-womanly agendas in the name of feminism is a remarkable example of how willing ideologues are not merely to believe in their own contradictory rhetoric, but to continue to create a narrative that, upon cursory examination, contradicts and cancels itself. From an article in the National Post by Colby Kosh entitled "Anti-Immigrant Immigrants Could Spell Doom for the Liberals. New research into immigrants who supported Donald Trump may be more pertinent to Canada than the U.S., which was published September the 8th, 2023. That's today. From that article, little short excerpt here. But the Liberals have taken a hatchet to selectivity, opening yawning side doors to immigration for refugees, students, and guest workers demanded by domestic businesses. The government is at risk of abandoning any thought of maximizing the human capital and potential for long-term success of the inbound population, let alone our ability to count the number of persons physically in Canada. And lots of us suspect that this looser policy has the secret intention of creating more future Canadian Liberal voters. But, brothers and sisters, this is absolutely not the way it is necessarily going to work out. End of article. End of my quote from that article. So, I asked ChatGPT the following, just to see what AI thinks about this self-defeating behavior. What is the psychological term for otherwise intelligent people repeatedly engaging in destructive behavior, even when all the evidence points to the behavior damaging them? ChatGPT responded with, the psychological term for otherwise intelligent people repeatedly engaging in destructive behavior, even when evidence suggests it's harmful, is often referred to as self-destructive behavior or self-sabotage. It can be associated with various underlying psychological factors such as low self-esteem, unresolved trauma. I'm wondering, maybe Trudeau got dropped on his head. Addiction, or even subconscious forms of behavior. Understanding and addressing these underlying factors typically require the help of a mental health professional. I couldn't agree more. So, that's the end of what ChatGPT had to say to me. So permit me to call upon the immortal Bard. Bard's own words as a fitting description of how Trudeau's government has authored its own ruin, with one disastrous economic, immigration, and social policy after another, too numerous now to enumerate. And marshal me to knavery, let it work, for 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard, and to shell go hard, and I will delve 1 yard below their mines, and blow them at the moon. Oh, 'tis most sweet, when in one line 2 crafts directly meet. This very day, and for the next several days, a Métis grandmother is on trial here in Ottawa. Tamara Leach's sole crime was to have dared to peacefully challenge Trudeau's authoritarian lockdown of Canada's supply chain due to his unscientific and authoritarian vaccine mandates. Isn't she the very epitome of every progressive trope Trudeau allegedly aligns himself with? As Dr. Jordan B. Peterson has often stated, I don't think Trudeau has ever spoken a true word. It would be such poetic justice to have Trudeau's ideological reign of incompetence to be ended by weapons of his own devising, hoist upon his own petard. Tamara's and Chris Barber's trial, and immigrants pushing back against Trudeau's radical agenda are a hammer forged in the furnace of Canada's outrage at being so mischaracterized and abused by their own Prime Minister. Personally, I think he is too witless to change his direction, since each and every time he has been caught with his hand in the proverbial cuckoo cookie jar, he has merely doubled down on behaviors which have provided us with all the evidence we need to come to the conclusion that he is a corrupt and venal liar. He is an ideologue who contradicts his own ideology. And the fact he isn't alone in this delusional attachment to ideas that are the source of his ruin gives us reason to believe that things throughout the Western world will proceed to become far more dire before a more reasoned narrative replaces this prevailing woke idiocy. These are things to think and pray about as we head into another lovely weekend, hopefully. We're heading up to the camp shortly. God bless you all. Again, things to think and pray about. Thank you for listening.